Dimensions and depths of covenant. And we're talking about the 4 cups today, but let me start with Revelation chapter 3. This is really important, guys. I'm praying that I feel like my words are coming out like a 4, but I'm feeling it like a 10 in my spirit. And I don't know how it's landing here, but I'm wrestling with this because I really want us to get it. Jesus says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anybody hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and I will dine with him and he with me. He who overcomes, I'll grant him to sit down with me on the throne as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. All right, most of us have read that before, but there might be a few that haven't. Here's the thing. There's a series of events that take place. First of all, you have to hear the knock. Now, let me say, we're living in a time of invitation right now on the earth. I mean, in my realm, my little sphere of the world, we're living in a time of invitation. There are invitations. Holy Spirit is like got a frequency going out, and it is an invitation to participate more in what he's doing on the earth. But first of all, you have to hear it. And there are so many people. Now, I'm talking about the church now. I'm not even talking about unbelievers. How are unbelievers going to hear unless somebody tells them? But now the church, this is a whole different deal. The church, there's so many people that are not even getting the invitation. They don't even hear him knocking on the door, let alone the next step, which is you've got to actually hear it, then open it. So there's this progression. You got to first hear the knock, then you got to open the door. And see, he initiates and we respond. He knocks, we open. And we're at the place right now. I mean, everybody in this room, for sure, right now, he's knocking in some level in your life, and you must yield to him. It's your responsibility to respond by opening. I don't know exactly what opening means to you today, but I know that he's sending out, he's standing at a door, and this doorway opens up everything to you. But you do have to open the door. And we look at this covenant issue, you'll see how this comes into play, at least just a little bit. When we're talking about betrothal, by the way, the different levels of covenant. We've talked about these in the past several weeks. The next opening of the door creates an opportunity to sit with Jesus in closer fellowship. Not everybody who calls themselves Christians are even at this level of fellowship with Jesus. There's a level of growth that takes place that allows you, a level of maturity, a level of obedience that allows you to get the invitation to come in. We're going to fellowship at a deeper level. It doesn't just happen automatically, people. Most of us know this by experience, but I knew it by experience before I had the theology for it, like I'm telling you right now. I knew it by experience through my life. So you're going to sit with Jesus, but the highest level is even beyond sitting with him. The highest level is what he says here. If you'll overcome a certain level of difficulty, it's like video game. I don't play video games, but I know people who do. Here's what I know. The levels are easy at first. That's all I know. Am I right? Yes. They're easy, and just anybody can get past level 1, level 2, level 3, but now there's level 300. There's level 250. Does anybody know anything about video? I don't, but I watch people and they nope, I can't do it. I mean, I can't bring myself to do it. I love to play games. No, I cannot. Let's see if I feel my nose getting longer. Oh, wait a minute, sports. That said, video games is not one of the things. Monopoly board games. I'm not going to play. Probably not going to play board games. That's very disappointing, I know, to most of you.
To me.
Card games. Okay, so, but there's levels. There's levels in these video games, I know. And the levels get more and more difficult until you lose lives, and they want you to pay money to get more lives.
No, you don't pay money.
Or I'll send out a bunch of stuff spam people on Facebook and try to get them to send you lives. All right. Previously, we mentioned 3 levels of covenant: servanthood, friendship, and inheritance. In the scripture, Jesus is identified as a bridegroom, and he compares all those who enter into all 3 levels of covenant with him as the bride. And here's what he said: if you overcome, I will grant you to sit on the throne with me and rule over creation. This is the end game. This is the highest level of responsibility. This is the highest level of relationship. He is giving you the opportunity by putting obstacles in your life, by putting trials in your life, by putting difficulties in your life and challenges. He said, you can overcome these things by my grace, and that will enable me to offer you the prize here. And the prize is you will sit with me in heavenly places and rule with me over the earth. But you've got to overcome some things. You've got to get to whatever level in the video game of life. 10,000. Yeah, in the video game of life. And here's the thing about a video game. There's always another level.
Same thing in this.
There's always another level. So here's the thing. When Jesus says, very simply, he's not in your notes, but quickly, he's very simple. He says, if you'll be faithful in just a little thing, and we're faithful by being obedient to him. If you'll be faithful in just a little thing, he said, I'll make you a ruler over what? 10 cities. But in 10 cities, I mean, it's one little thing, and you'll be multiplied exponentially, your level of responsibility, of rulership, really. Who doesn't want to rule? Who doesn't want to be large and in charge? It's just the people who want to sit at home and play video games. They're the only ones. Just joking. I'm just joking. People who don't know me around. All right. Matthew 22, it says, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who gives a wedding feast for his son. Now, we all know the story. The invitations are sent out, but the guests give a bunch of excuses why they can't attend, why they can't engage. And it's all good. These are good reasons, good excuses. Work, relationships. I'm having trouble with relationships. I'm really buried at work. I got this, I've got that. And these are all good excuses, but we can't get away from the fact that he tells this story for us to understand this is us now. And we don't want to find ourselves in that first group of people who are actually making a bunch of excuses why we can't engage at a higher level. Yet there will be those people. And in verse 8, jumping to verse 8, he said, the wedding's ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. See, there are invitations going out. And there's going to be this group of people that you don't want to find yourself in. The ones who are not really worthy to be in the wedding itself. And he talks about the slaves and he sends them. You can read that on your own. And the king came in to look the whole thing over. And he finds some people that weren't really prepared to be at this event. How they got in, I do not know. But I want you to know, I think about this theologically. So let me just give you an idea. I think of this as people who are going to actually be in eternity, in heaven. Heaven's coming to earth. And that's why we're calling for heaven to come to earth. Your kingdom come, your will be done. But that in the age to come, I believe that increasingly, I didn't always believe this either, by the way, that there will be people that will actually be saved from the fires of hell, but they will not be the bride. They will be there, but they won't have overcome enough levels to actually be the bride, but they won't be damned either, you see? Now this presents a conundrum to about 99% of the American church, because we all think once we got saved, we're going to be the bride of Christ. And I'm sad to say, and this is why our church is the size that it is, some people are going to be in for a rude awakening, I believe. And nobody wants to hear that. Why would they? So they go on and confess all these things that are theirs, and they haven't done the first level of covenant. It was just to be serve and obey. And they're confessing all these bridal things, and they can't even get a revelation, but they're just hearing it and saying it. Oh, help me, Jesus. All right. So many are called, but few are chosen. See, so there's a lot of calling being done, and that's how we got to where we're at today, because we were called, and we're working on the chosen part. I want to be chosen by him. I confess that we're chosen by him, but he's already laid out many, many things for me to actually do in obedience to him by faithfulness in order to get to that place. I know this is difficult for some people. But now in the wedding, I'm going to try to explain it a little bit deeper by covenant. Wedding in ancient Hebrew culture was a process involving commitment and covenant, the fulfillment of which often took many years. And that's just like our lifetime in walking with the Lord. A lot of people involved, including families, friends, the rest of the community, each group having different responsibilities. There was a match. Of course, you've all seen Fiddler on the Roof. You've heard the song, Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match. Catch me a catch. Find me a fine. Oh, that's my favorite musical. You don't know that song? Who here does not know? Everyone should go see Fiddler on the Roof. All the men who don't think you can sit through a musical, don't go to Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Go, go to something like Fiddler on the Roof. Can we strike that from the YouTube?
Too late.
I've been to all of them, guys. Believe me, I've been to all of them, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, kind of. Everybody has their personal preferences. I've been to many. Oklahoma. Darn it, I haven't been to the Muni all season. All right. There was a match between the parties that was always subject to the bride's approval. The bride could back out at any time during the whole process. The only one in this whole betrothal process. Does the American church have any idea of what betrothal really is? Do we have a paradigm? We call it engagement. But betrothal is really a whole different thing. And as I said, we were dividing the difference between, and I'll do it one more time, our American, Western, Greco-Roman culture in which we live and spend 100% of our time, really. And then we have this Hebrew tribal culture that is a biblical culture, and it's an Eastern perspective. And we try to take truth out of that's meant this way, and we try to shape it by our Western paradigm. And we come to entirely different conclusions when we do that. Misdirected, misguided conclusions. We cannot take truth that is meant in a particular kingdom culture, the culture of the kingdom. We cannot fit that into our Western culture. It doesn't fit. Yet we're struggling with it because just the language alone. We have to know these words have many different meanings that they don't even have translations for. Now, I learned some of these things because I lived in foreign countries where I had to learn languages. And when I did that, there were certain words that did not translate well into English. So it's easier for me to grasp that there's Hebrew things that God had to take a race of people who were slavery for 400 years and create a custom, and create a culture of people that did not have a slave mentality. They had the mentality of Egypt. And he had to create, he can do it with millions of people, he can create a kingdom culture. And that's what he cultivated over generations. He cultivated a kingdom culture. And it's tribal. And we are not tribal at all. We're individualistic. A tribal culture means we're together. We do things together. We Americans are so individualistic. We're independent, and we love that we're independent. 4th of July is our biggest holiday. One of our biggest. I'm sorry for you Christmas lovers.
Really?
Yeah. Independence. We celebrate independence. The kingdom celebrates dependence. On the day the prospective bridegroom makes his first official move, he brings his father to attend the bride's house, and they carry this cup of wine, this betrothal cup, and anticipate bride price. There's a bride price. They actually agreed upon a certain amount of money as a dowry to do the exchange, and this would solidify. There's a price to be paid to get the bride, and it's not that easy. It's not a stretch for us to see that Jesus paid the ultimate price to get his bride. You cannot pay a higher price than the one he paid for his bride. And the bride's father would be on the other side of the door. They knock on the door. They go to the door and they knock. But it's all, they know that the guy's coming. They know the bridegroom is coming, but they don't know when. There's a window of time. There's a window of time between 6 p.m. It can happen. There's like a 2-week window, but the day that he's going, there's a window of time like 6 p.m. to midnight. I mean, they got to stay awake watching. The father of the bride stands at the door and waits for the knock. And the two of them decide, are we going to open the door or not? I mean, this is really the way it was. And I'm not sure in Orthodox communities, I suppose this is the way it really is. I can't really say. I don't really know. But I know this was the way that it was. And so it's so fascinating to me because he would peek out a little window to identify who it really is. And this is Jesus saying, I stand at the door and knock. You crack the door open like, what? Really? You want me to do what?
Oh, beautiful.
You said you're going to do what? You said you want me? I mean, there's this whole... We still do this to this day. You want me? To this day. They identify the visitors. He looks to his daughter to confirm what, in most cases, she had long since settled in her own mind. Should he open the door? Opening the door means a commitment level forever. And this is why people vacillate to really open the door. They want their own life. And they want Jesus and their own life. They want it all. I don't want to just give him my life. I want my life, but I want him kind of worked into it in a convenient way. And he will not do it on your terms. Listen, I'm getting stronger. I've said this a long time, but I'm getting stronger because I'm hearing other people say it now as well. It's not only me. For years, I'm the only guy I could hear say this. But now, this whole thing about asking Jesus in your heart, it's diabolical. It really is. It's wrong. It's wrong. Just ask Jesus in your heart, like fit him into your day timer, get him on your calendar of your phone. No, that's not how it works. No, he says, you come to me one way. I gave my life. I want your life, the whole thing. You give me your life. Your life is no longer your own. You have been bought with a price. Too many people have a theology out there. Oh, I accepted Jesus in an emotional moment. I accepted Jesus into my life. And I give him certain blocks of time, and I give him a little bit. I tip him every now and then when the offering thing comes around, and I give him little slivers of my life. But I'm busy. I got this and I got that. And he said, no, the deal wasn't made. The deal was not made. There's a bunch of people think the deal was done, but it wasn't, because their end of the covenant wasn't, I'm all in. And it's a misnomer when somebody says, here. You can you can accept Jesus. No. Will he accept you? That's the question. Will you be all in? Will you give him everything? I mean, you no longer have a life. From that moment on, you don't have a life anymore. Your life begins in him at that point. And that's not the theology that I hear being preached so many places. Fortunately for me, now I hear other people saying that as well. Opening the door was a major step toward making the marriage work, which is exactly what Jesus is saying in Revelation 3. When we open the door, he comes in. The restoration process begins when we open the door. It just begins. And he's asking us if we will enter into the covenant of betrothal with him. Now, see, some people think they're at the marriage level with Jesus and they're still in the betrothal level because they haven't met the requirements yet. Oh, we're not talking about salvation. Just so you understand, anybody can be saved, but it's just the first step. He said, blessed are those who see the kingdom, but then he also said, blessed are those who actually enter into the kingdom. There's a difference. You can see the kingdom by getting saved, but you're not entering in until you're actually walking in it. There's so many saved people that are actually not walking in covenant. They won't die and go to hell, but they're not married. They're not going to be the bride. It's just, I got to find a nicer way to say that. 2 Timothy 2:11. It's a trustworthy statement. If we died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign. That's a big if. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he will deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful. He can't deny himself. All right, in Jewish betrothal, the bride was the only party who could back out at any time during the process. The progressive nature of covenant requires each of us to enter into these first three stages that we talked about weeks gone by. Service, friendship, inheritance, before we ever receive the invitation to enter into the fourth level of covenant. Each one helps to establish, support, and reinforce the ancient Hebrew betrothal agreement. 4 cups of wine, and we're going to get into in a minute, are milestones. They're markers to signify that you've actually entered into the stages. There was negotiations along the way, and I find a way to say this, but it doesn't seem to land right. I have negotiated with the Lord I don't know how far I've gotten. But there are things that he's willing to negotiate. It's a marriage, after all. He's not a tyrant dictator. And neither can you be, husband. Marriage is a negotiation. It's between two parties. And I was in for a rude awakening when I got married. I didn't realize that there was another person that was actually going to have things that they wanted to do, and they had their preferences, and they weren't the same as mine. But I was willing to, can we? Well, I didn't want to talk about it. I was back in the first, this is the way it's going to be. And it's like, oh, no, it isn't. And then that's why I had to tell Mary that the next 20 years would make up for the first 20 years. But anybody that's in any kind of a covenant level, they understand that, you've got to sort stuff out. It's not just going to be my way or the highway, or it will be the highway. And Jesus is not saying it's my way or the highway, by the way. I just want you to know, entering into the agreement, yes, there are conditions. Should we talk about unconditional love? Believe me, his love is conditional. It's conditional. There are conditions that have to be met. We're not going there this morning. Maybe you'll wonder about it for a little bit. All right. Each cup corresponded to a covenant, but it also represents something that all the participants had to physically grasp, to physically consume, and to make a part of themselves. Please go back over and just read these notes a little bit. For those of you that aren't really note people, I'm praying for a revelation for all of us to understand this. So Jesus said, I'll come to him and dine with him and him with me. It speaks of what traditionally happens next in the betrothal process. Now see, if you're a Western, if Jesus says, I will come to him and dine with him and he with me, that doesn't make that much sense to us when we hear it in Revelation. But to a Hebrew person who grew up in this culture, they understand this was him talking about the next level of the betrothal process. But we don't have the betrothal process, really. I do remember one of my son-in-laws that happens to be here, and my daughter was away at college, the one sitting next to him right over there. And he was really, I admire this of him now, but he was a young guy. I don't remember how young, but pretty young. But he actually came over to have dinner with our family while she was away at college. It was a very wise thing to do. And because we had some really heart-to-heart conversations. And it kind of went something like this. Okay, Tom, what do I really have to do to marry her? And I just lined out a few things. Now, these kind of things don't happen that often anymore in this life. But it did happen in this particular case. And so it was I was a little intimidating back then. Every one of my daughters was like, it took me a while to be convinced that this was the guy. Every one of them. I think that's probably just any dad. I'm not sure. Maybe you have a better experience than I have. But in the end, it all sorted out because I prayed for my daughter's husbands, all of their lives. And that's what was reminded. I was always, God, send this guy to these guys to these girls. These have to be people, And I did. I labored over these things. And so when somebody would come along, then I had to reconsider. I've been praying for these guys, so I know that the Lord's involved in this process. But this sitting down and having dinner, when Jesus said that, if you were a Hebrew in a Hebrew culture and you read this, you understood this was him fulfilling Old Testament, what we would call Old Testament. I don't even like the term Torah betrothal process. It was all in that culture. It was in their culture, so they would understand. He's fulfilling now betrothal process on the way to getting his bride. But we don't understand it that way. All right. Where am I?
Jesus appeared to Abraham.
Members of the Chu family. Well, Jesus appeared to Abraham the same way, had a meal with him. That's the first time that ever happened. No one ever in the history of mankind had ever sat down and had a meal with God. The closest they got was in Exodus, I think at 24, where actually the 70 elders, they stood on the mountain and they saw God's feet. And it was, could you imagine? Well, I would take that. I would take that. I'm going to go have a meal in the presence of God, and I am going to see his feet. Okay, where do I sign up? Well, they paid with their lives, but that's That's Abraham had to keep, put his son on an altar. There's this thing, there are requirements that you'll have to make to have those kind of experiences, for sure. Believe me, people, because we can encounter the presence of God in this place the way we do, someone had to pay a price to experience the presence of God the way we do. Because you just don't go anywhere and experience the presence of God. And all you all have paid a price. Costs you something. All right, 4 cups. We're going to get through these quickly. Cup of sanctification. This is the blood covenant between the 2 families. This cup was consumed almost as soon as the door was closed. Everybody participated, agreeing to serve the other family. Sanctification, as we all know, embodies the idea of setting ourselves apart for God, and this is what the bride was doing. The family was all in agreement. They did it together as a family, and they said, we're negotiating now and setting this bride apart for this man. They're making a sacred commitment to become one giant family. Oh, I wonder if we really think of it that way when we're just sharing in the Lord's Supper here amongst us. Are we making a commitment to one another that we're going to be one giant family? Well, that's really what it was about in the betrothal unto the covenant. This is a part of the covenant that I pray that would be restored even among us here. All right, the cup of betrothal had different names. You can see all the different names. Please do your research. Don't take my word for any of this. Do your own research. A lot of what I'm getting, I've told you before, came out of this book called Lost in Translation. I highly recommend this book to everyone. But a lot of this but you can Google all these things and you'll find it all to be true. But do that on your own. Don't take my word for it. Cup of betrothal represents the salt covenant between families. This cup was consumed only by the bride, the groom, and their 2 fathers. As they ate together, the members of both families haggled over the details of the marriage contract. Can you just imagine 2 Jewish families and haggling over, I just so can, haggling over, the details of working it all out. I'm sure there was shouting, pounding on the table. I just think we, in our society, don't quite understand what it means to really do the whole thing about Jacob wrestling with God and what it really means to us. He's willing to engage us on levels that we think are like, oh, I can't go there with God. But I just think you can. And I suggest that you do. Go there with God. Get into the wrestle. Get into the haggle. Oh, I know now that the Lord gives me such grace, and He allows me to speak to Him, not just as I'm only worshiping Him, but also as someone whom really heart to heart I can talk things out with. And it's like, what about this? Here's my view. What is yours? That's a discussion that we can have with Him. Anybody, a husband and wife, would have these discussions if it's a healthy marriage, healthy covenant. If the negotiations were going to break down, this is where they were going to break down, right here, where they're having this discussion. So then Philippians says, just as you have always obeyed, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. It means that things have to be worked out in your life in order to proceed and make progress in your walk with Him. It's no good. I was just reading, the Lord calls out those who are stagnant in spirit. And we do not want to be those that are stagnant in spirit, but they are there. I was reading it in Jeremiah. And so there's work that you have to sort things out in your covenant relationship. That's all I'm going to say about that. The ketubah is not a word you have to remember, but let's just talk about this. Do you know what this is, ketubah? Yeah, of course. 5-part covenant, formally written out by a scribe or a rabbi. I'm just going to quickly run through the 5 parts. A family history of the bride and groom, detailed family trees, family history of the bride, family history of the groom, story of how the bride and groom met, details of bride and groom's responsibilities before and after the wedding. There's 5 different layers. And I want you to notice the correlation between the 5 recorded parts of the agreement and the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah it's called, or the Pentateuch. You know that by now. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They're all written as a marriage agreement between God and His chosen people. Everything Jesus said and did was to enforce what was written in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Everything He said and did was to enforce what was written in that agreement. It wasn't some other plan. It was this plan in the flesh. It was Jesus Christ. He's the same yesterday and today. He was the same when Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy were being lived out. He was the same then. But now he's living on the earth and he's saying, I am all the things that were recorded. It's not either or. All right. The details were not limited to the price he would pay. Were included, but were not limited to the price he'd pay for compensation of the family's loss of their daughter. I should have negotiated this a little better. It was called the bride price because, after all, I'm going to lose my daughter. How the families would share financial responsibilities for the wedding. Lord Jesus. Now, we got it all wrong in America. I can attest. 5 daughters. Lord Jesus. How the families would share responsibilities for the wedding. Dang. Lord, I want to be in it. I want to do it like this. I want to replay, a do-over.
No. No.
How the groom would eventually support the bride. How are you going to, this is one of the questions I asked my sons-in-law. How are you going to support her? We better be thinking about a career, son. We did have that conversation more than once. How the bride intended to be an excellent wife. I mean, these are all things that they talked about, was far before the wedding night. What possessions she would bring with her, assurances of chastity. There's just a lot of details. And they talked about these things. And how, after this, I just want you to read John 14. It says, my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. For I'm going to go to prepare a place. And we've read that before. And so after the ketubah was finalized, the groom-to-be would prepare their new home. And it was usually a room addition to the father's house. It was just an addition. They would, because they were more tribal than we are. They weren't wanting to get away from their families. They wanted to stay near their families. And I can at least attest to this kingdom's value in my own life. I never wanted any of my kids to leave, ever. I always wanted them to stay. I wish they never leave. I mean, I liked it when they go, I just always want them around me. And this is more kingdom mentality than, let's wait till they're 18 years old and kick them out of the house so they can learn to be independent. You do have to train them to be on their own. Yes. But not to cut off the relationship. I think that we need a little bit more of a Hebrew cultural mindset, a kingdom cultural mindset, if you will, that we're family forever. I just really don't like that my children live in other cities of the United States, and I'm sure that Jesus didn't ask my opinion, by the way, but I told him. I said, but not my will, but yours to be done over my children. I don't always like it. All right.
7 seals. That's impressive. 7 seals.
Yeah. There's just so much here that we're just kind of glossing over. 7 seals, of course, we see the 7 seals in Revelation, but we're not going to talk about that this morning. Everybody, there were 2 witnesses, of course. We're not going to talk about the 2 witnesses, Revelation, but anybody that understood the way the covenant went, there were 2 witnesses, Revelation. There's a whole lot of the book of Revelation that ties all the way back to Genesis and the beginnings, purposely, of course. But unless you really have a Hebrew understanding and you study these things out, which takes great time, and not everybody has large blocks of time. Thank God some of us do, but if you do, you'll realize so much of what Revelation was doing was just sealing up forever all these things that were done early on, starting Genesis chapter 1. I mean, just right there. Genesis 1:1, in fact. When Jesus said, I'm the Aleph Toph, or Jesus said, I'm the Alpha and Omega, he was just reiterating Genesis 1:1. There's a hidden symbol in there, Aleph Toph, that we're not going to talk about today, but we don't even have a translation for it in English. That's how much we miss when he said, first he said it to John twice, I'm the beginning and the end, I'm the Aleph Toph. Those are the S, the A, and the Z in the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Taf. And there's so much to this that we need to understand, which is why I'm so thankful that God has put it front burner in our fellowship, that we would actually give ourselves to some degree to learn some of these things. There's great revelation in doing what it is that we're going after right now. But we have to also live life. All right. Cup of redemption, or the cup of inheritance, signified the shared inheritance of the marriage partners. This cup was drunk at the end of the meal by the bride and the groom only, to symbolize their exclusive commitment to each other, along with increasing their level of intimacy. It officially sealed the marriage agreement. And the young men of the families would go out and blow the shofar, announcing that the marriage contract had been signed. And it was this written agreement by the scribes and Pharisees. But of course, we are bound by contracts in this country. But a contract in a marriage covenant was just one fractional part of the entire agreement, you see. In our world, it's just done by contract. Everything is done just by a signature. Because people don't think they can trust your word anymore. No, I can't trust your word. I got to have this on your name on paper, and that will give me legal access. And Jesus is saying, the best legal access you can have into my life is my word. Because he'll back it up. All right. Sealed deal. And during the Passover feast, or the Last Supper, Jesus removed the sandals from his disciples' feet. And this was his sandal covenant that I talked about earlier. And he made reference to the coming marriage to his called out ones, knowing that it was customary for the groom not to drink wine again till the wedding ceremony. Now, we've read this before, but now this fits perfectly into this betrothal stage. When he had taken the cup and given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is blood of my covenant, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new, when you join in my Father's kingdom." Now, they fully understood the betrothal process in what Jesus was doing there when he said that. We do not. We want to. I can't tell you how valuable it is to understand these things in the context in which they did it. I'm reading this other guy, and he says, you can't begin to understand what Paul was saying unless you can understand the context in which he lived, all the things that he wrote, the things that Paul wrote. If you didn't understand the Jewish Hebrew context of he was a Pharisee that knew the word as well as anyone, you wouldn't be able to grasp the revelation in the content of what it was that he said. So it's not just the content, it's the context in which those things were written. And this is what we lack in our Western Greco-Roman world, the context. What we're talking about here, the context in which Jesus said those things. All right. Each time we participate in the Lord's Supper, not only, we're top of page 4, not only do we recognize how Jesus gave his life for us on the cross, but it's equally important to remember that we're making a recommitment to pursue him, a recommitment to wrestle with him, a recommitment to be his friend and to manage his estate through our stewardship. And this is a great thing to pray. Lord, however much you can trust me with, Lord, that I want to be found faithful as a steward with that which you have entrusted to me. And Lord, if I can be found faithful in that, would you increase my level of stewardship and my level of responsibility? That's a good prayer. I mean, I recommend it over everyone. Find me faithful in that which you have entrusted to me now, that you might increase my level of responsibility with your kingdom. He trusts us with advancement of his kingdom. It's crazy, right? Oh, he trusts us. When we drink the cup, we are committing again to him every time we do this. We are committing again to serve him, to obey him, to follow his rules and his ordinances. The commitment we make at that moment is the same as what a bride and groom make to each other. And people, I pray that you would just underline that sentence and meditate on it. The commitment we make when we share in the cup of the Lord's Supper and the wine, the blood in the wine, the blood in the bread, is the same commitment that a groom would make with his bride on their wedding day. This is what we're doing every time that we share in the Lord's Supper. It's that serious about our level of covenant that we're saying, I'm in all the way. It's not casual. The cup of praise, the fourth one, shared between the bride and groom only during the wedding ceremony itself. The cup awaits all those who are chosen to be the bride by Jesus. It'll be taken on the wedding day and forever seal his union with his beloved. Here's something very important. We become eligible for the first covenant, the fourth level of covenant, only after we've met all the previous requirements. This is why I'm telling you that this covenant is conditional. We've met all the previous requirements by entering into the first three. The decision to do so are ours alone. However, Jesus chooses his own bride to whom he promises the crown of life. He gives the invite, we respond. He's inviting each one of us to a higher level of covenant, but we must respond appropriately in obedience and faithfulness. All right. Revelation 2, it says, don't fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison so that you'll be tested. You'll have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. So there are people who are believing that they've been given the crown of life, but he's saying, no, there's going to be a testing, and you're going to have to be proven faithful before you're going to actually get the crown of life. His words, not mine. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. So I've just got in the notes there, the covenants and mikveh is a ceremonial bath. Listen, people, it's not. I don't want to know all about Jewish tradition. I don't. I don't have really any interest in Jewish tradition in and of itself, just so you understand. What I am interested in knowing the heart of Jesus. And there's so many things that we've just talked about in these few pages that we never would have understood had we not talked about this betrothal unto covenant. See, he's inviting us in at a certain level unto something deeper in him. But there's a level of covenant that we have not yet experienced that we are getting an invitation to participate. It's our invitation. And we are living, I believe, in a time of invitation where the invitation is going out, but it's who will respond, just like the parable that we talked about.